Hello and welcome to another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest this week is Shreeya Sinha, editorial director of New York Times Audio. They just launched the app last week. This is one of her first major interviews. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer and occasional guest host of the show. We're so thrilled you could join us. This is going to be a little bit different. We focus on the print edition usually every Sunday, but we're going to focus, I guess you can call it the audio edition of the New York Times. The audio app is the home for all of the audio journalism uh, at the Times, and we're so thrilled that Shreeya can join us. Please like, comment, share, retweet, do all the things to let people know about the show. Let us know where you're watching from. We are going to be doing a deep dive into the app. Shreeya is going to be walking us through the various features. We're going to play some of the audio, and Shreeya is going to talk to her about how it was developed. Um, so as we get going, we want to give a quick shout out to Jonathan watching from the East Village. Jonathan, it's always great to see you. Always one of our first viewers logging in. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We have Doug watching from San Francisco, 5:30 local time. Doug, I know that you always say that this is what you always do. You're an old radio guy. You wake up early, but still, it means a lot that you're joining us. And in terms of the international flavor of audience, Dipti is watching from India, and she's watching on LinkedIn. So big hello to Dipti over there. So with that, we're going to bring on Sri Srinivasan to kick off the show. Hey, Sri.
Good morning, Neil. Thank you so
Good
much for
morning.
being you every Sunday, putting together the show. Our executive producer, we love doing the show. We've been doing this for almost 8 years now. You've
I know.
joined along the way. He took what was my kind of stumbling, bumbling efforts around Facebook and put together this really well-produced show that goes on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and our digimentors.group website. And it allows us to talk about journalism in a very special way. I happen to be in Washington, D.C. this weekend. We're here to
Right over there
celebrate.
somewhere.
Yeah, over there. We're celebrating my mom and the posthumous book we published. She died in January. I was blessed to be with her. It's called The Better Half of Diplomacy. It's available on Amazon. And it's a bittersweet thing to be able to celebrate your mom while also grieving for her.
Sure.
And I would have typically, when I'm in DC, do a Washington Post read along. A couple of years ago, we did it with Mark Fisher, the deputy editor of the Washington Post, in his home. We also
Yeah.
read the Washington Post with Steve Herman, who is with the VOA. So that's what we typically do, but we couldn't miss this chance to talk about this big new addition to the New York Times universe, the New York Times audio app. And the head of it is here. Shreeya Sinha is going to join us in just a minute. And we're going to talk about the app. We're going to talk about how it came together, what it means for the New York Times. And it's not just the New York Times content. This has a different flavor because it brings in other publishers as well. And there's so much to talk about. Of course, we'll look at the print paper as well. I have it here. Here's the Times. And I have to go to three,
Absolutely.
four places to get it, but it's available in DC even this early. We have lots of people checking in. Always happy to see. I see James Sims. Hi from Connecticut. I also see Ken Fisher is here. Good morning
Sh-
from Iowa City.
Sri, before you move on, shout out to Wesleyan University. That's my alma mater, and James works there now. So always, and they have their reunion and commencement next weekend. So thank you for spending the morning with us, James.
Yeah, James always engaging with our content. We love that. And Ken watching from Iowa City, and our friend and colleague Stephen Kaplan from beautiful Ramsey, New Jersey. This is so exciting. Audio is vital these days. Pradnya Haldipur somewhere here in Silver Spring, Maryland. Good morning, lovelies. And Doug is watching on multiple channels. There he's on YouTube saying a fabulous part of every Sunday. And Wajahat is watching from the Upper West Side. He and I had dinner in London just a few weeks ago. Naomi is watching from the Upper West Side. Naomi, thank you for always suggesting great guests. If you know people who are willing to get up at 8:30 a.m. Eastern on Sunday mornings and join us, please tell them. I see
But
also.
Sri, Naomi is not watching alone. Her
Mhm.
husband Lou, I believe, got up early today to watch because he was a colleague of Shreya's at the Times. He
Oh,
worked with her
nice.
there. So
Nice.
thank you, Naomi.
I love that. Miriam is watching from Hell's Kitchen in New York City, and Liz Pressman from Western Massachusetts. So, what I'd like to do is first just thank our wonderful sponsor. The folks at Muckrack do so much for us and for the world of comms and journalism. We appreciate their sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor what we're doing here with the Read Along, please get in touch with us, sri@digimentors.group or Neil at digimentors.group, and we'd love to talk to you. Muckrack, you'll know, many of you know, is the world's largest gathering of verified journalists, a directory. And if you're in PR, you definitely need it. And if you're a journalist, you should be on it. And journalists always access Muckrack for free, so do check it out. So let's bring in Shreeya Sinha. We are delighted to have her with us on this show. We're going to be talking about the New York Times audio app with her, and let's see if she is.
Shreya Sinha. Shreya,
Good
so
morning.
glad you could join us.
Good
Um,
morning, Shri and Neil. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And
We
I
really
admit
appreciate it.
I'm not a morning person, actually, but I've come to love this show over the 10 years that I've known you, Shri.
Yeah, Sri's going to jump right back in. He's just logging back in. But you've been watching for a number of years, Shreya.
The backstory is Shri was dean of the journalism school for student affairs when I was there, when I first started. So he sort of always has seen me sort of grow up in the journalism space and was a professor who taught social media. Back
Yes,
then, getting your own
new
website
media,
up. Yes,
new
new
media at the
media.
time.
So, he's still at it and always ahead of the game.
Yeah, at the time, so it was like you said, it was about 8 years ago. It was in October. Sri, Facebook Live had just become a thing, and of course, he loved journalism in the New York Times. So he literally fired up his phone one day. So let's experiment with this. Let's see how the Facebook Live works, and it started this show, and it was just on Facebook for a number of years. And I started working with him when it was Facebook, and then we switched to this app, which let us go to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And Sri is back. Sri,
Yeah, fun with Wi-Fi in hotels, right? That's one of the things that happens. But thank you. I heard you guys talking about the our background, our connection, and we should tell people who might be listening and a little confused when if they're not watching carefully. What we keep saying, Sri and Shreya, and tell me how
Yes,
you pronounce your name.
my name is Shreya Sinha.
Mhm. Okay,
And
and
yours
whenever
is Sri
I say
Srinivasan.
exactly.
So,
Whenever someone says Sri or Siri, Siri kind of sometimes wakes up. So that also happens with me with my name. I don't know if it's ever happened to you. So we've
not
got
yet.
lots to talk about. Yeah, we've got lots to talk about. Thank you for getting up. Are you a morning person on Sundays?
Definitely not, but I have very much look forward to this. And thank you so much for having me on the show as your old and former student. It's so exciting to get to chat with you about everything in the last decade, really.
Yeah, and I want to say that well, it's a thrill for professors to have their students succeed, go out, have full, meaningful careers, but also full, meaningful lives beyond just the work that they do. and I've had the chance to watch you. And to imagine that Shreeya Sinha, who walked into the J School all those years ago, is now editorial director of New York Times Audio is just incredible, and that says so much about you. And at the same time, that title and the fact that New York Times Audio is a thing also tells you how much journalism has changed in those years in between. And for everyone watching, please follow Shreeya on social. She's on Twitter at Shreeya Sinha. And I just want to hear all about the audio app and what that means. And we'll also have a chance for her to shout out some of her colleagues and friends who've been working on this. To me, it seems like kind of a stealth project. It sort of came out of nowhere, but I'm sure some people know a lot more about it. So why don't you set the scene for us? And a reminder to everyone, we'll talk to her, we'll listen to some audio, we'll understand what all this means, and we'll also be looking at the print paper. So there's a lot to do. We're here till 10 a.m. Eastern. Please tag your friends. Please hit share right now on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and they'll be able to watch this as soon as it's over. It'll come back on. I'll just say hi to Pradnya, who says that Mirza is watching the Uncle Sri show with us this morning. And there is that moment, and I'm sure it's happened to even you. Someone calls you auntie for the first time, and you're like, what is that? How does that happen? And Yois is watching from Philadelphia. Thank you so much on LinkedIn. And Doug says that Muckrack is one of his most important tools. And thank you for sponsoring the show. We appreciate that. And Anupam is watching from Austin, Texas. So I'm going to hand the stage over to Shreeya and tell us everything.
Thank you. Well, I'm so excited from the promotion from student to Auntie Shreeya and Uncle Shri. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about the New York Times new audio app. Actually, it just launched on Wednesday, and it's a new app for journalism and storytelling for NYT News subscribers on iOS. It includes flagship podcasts, a new daily playlist of news, narrated articles, partnerships with This American Life, Serial The Athletic. And with the New York Times, we just wanted to see, everyone is so used to reading with the Times, is what would the expression of audio for the New York Times even sound like? And we wanted to see, as a group of editors, if we could offer that serendipity, that big story, that surprise and delight, all with your phone in your pocket locked. And a few years ago, I think it was actually only 2017, the Daily launched to such huge fanfare around the world that it's now a mainstay of how people consume journalism. And ever since the Daily became a flagship, audio became increasingly vital to the Times journalism. Now it has more than 9 million subscribers. We have at the New York Times, both internet and paper combined. And at the end of 2022, the Daily had 129 million downloads per month. And so the Times has been strategically looking at audio alliances for the last few years, acquiring Serial Productions, Autumn, the company that did narrated articles, and of course, making a partnership with This American Life. And this was right before COVID, I would say. This year has been many, many years in the making. And I, of course, can't take credit. Stephanie Price, Sam Dolnick. There are others who came before me, but I was hired in a series of other leaders to think about what would it take to power a 24/7 audio app for the Times. And so as the podcast industry is now sort of collapsing in and of itself, we're looking at this new audio app sort of as a canvas for brand new forms of storytelling and journalism. No longer are we sort of beholden to the audio platforms, whether it's Apple or Spotify. We don't know much about our audience there. We don't know much about what we can do. And as someone who's always sort of started my career in multimedia journalism, whether that's photography, visuals, putting it all together, digital audio, for me feels a natural extension of innovation and experimentation, which the other platforms sort of didn't allow. Everything was, an hour and a half podcast. As soon as Serial came on the scene, everyone has a true crime podcast, and that format that Serial sort of created hasn't changed much. And so we're offering in this app exclusive new shows, a headlines show, reporter reads, where reporters describe how they found their stories, what surprised them. You get to hear directly from our journalists. And so I'm very excited about, the power of audio journalism to bring stories to life.
That is so cool. I've always said that we are in a golden age of radio. Again, we talk about the 50s, 60s, 40s as golden age of radio. We just don't call it radio anymore. It's audio. And the fact that the podcasting world has become what it is, that the Times is looking at this from a different point of view. You know that so many publishers, including the Times and others, gave everything over to the social platforms, to Facebook and other places, and they were at the whim of those platforms, right? So everyone's like pivoting to video, then metaverse, then this and that and everything else. The platforms don't know what they're doing. Journalists and the business side of journalists know what they're doing, with lots of headwinds happening and turbulence, of course, especially at the smaller regional other places. The Times is able to fund and do things like this, and that's special. We always say on the show, even though we talk a lot about the print New York Times, this is really about a celebration of journalism. Every Sunday, we want to focus on facts and fighting disinformation, misinformation, and that's also partly what you're doing every day with the audio app. So for those of you who just joined us, that's Shreeya Sinha. She's the editorial director of audio at the New York Times, and they just launched on Wednesday the New York Times audio app on iOS only. And I know Neil and other Android fans are waiting, and so we'd like to just start on that point. How did you decide it's better to launch with an iOS and see what happens there, rather than do both together?
Thanks, Sri. Well, it takes a while to launch an app. And I think with the resources that we had, we spent a lot of careful time in a closed beta period. As much as it was also about launching an app and a new product, it was sort of getting the audio teams ready to sort of pivot to this moment where you're supplying short form stories, reacting to the news. And so when we launched, we wanted to just get this out there and see what people think, and really work with our audience and listeners and readers to develop this product, rather than, perfect it for iOS, perfect it for Android, and release it in the world for both. I assure you, we're building out our audience on iOS, but stay tuned for updates about our presence on Android. I know that was a big point, and I'm sorry to disappoint so many fans, but stay tuned.
And let's take a look at some of the materials that you can share in this format, so that we can look at the website, and we've got some cool stuff. If you want to just hold up your app, we can look at that as well. But Neil has some visuals for us. Here is the app, and maybe you can talk that through as you're seeing it. What are we looking at?
Yeah.
First of all, it's in the App Store. It's free to download, and this is for subscribers. So Pradnya had the very good question about, there are different tiers of subscriptions and things like that. So who can get this? And is there a free promo or preview for a few weeks?
Very good question. I'm so glad you asked. This is available for people who have the News Times subscription. So if you have the New York Times News app, if you're subscribed to that, you should be able to get our app. And this is part of the bundle strategy now, where if you get the New York Times News, you'll get the audio, you'll get cooking, you'll get games, and obviously a bit more. And secondly, great question. We are every day releasing for a limited time some of our shows in the app. So if you go to the homepage, You will see This American Life, an early preview of what gets released later on their podcast feeds. It's their early episode this week. So look forward to seeing more of that over the next few weeks from our app.
So
Thank
there
you.
you go. So again, a reminder to follow her on Twitter, Shreeya Sinha, and she's making the Headlines show, which is their kind of flagship show on the app. They're making it available in the app for free without subscription. So the idea is that you'll be able to preview it on your iOS app. So it works on iPad and iPhone, and the idea here, I also gather, is to take different pieces of audio you have that the Times already does, including the Daily, and put it in here. And now you've mentioned one of the great brands in audio in America, This American Life. So tell us, what is that partnership? And you have other partners as well from other organizations. And that's a brand that now, of course, more people know around the world, but it is really one of the classic American brands.
Yeah, Shri, thanks for that question. I think what excites me so much about this app is that it's also sort of an audio universe, not just for the Times new offerings, but also for magazine long listens to This American Life and Serial. So with This American Life, we have a strategic partnership with them where we get new episodes a day early. Compared to what's in the feed. So Saturday morning, you'd get This American Life in our app. Sunday afternoon, evening, you get This American Life off platform, Apple, Spotify. And we also have Best of This American Life, which is basically the best from Ira Glass and his vault. And what we've also done is taken up the show and segmented into bite-sized clips so you can enjoy the show even if you don't have a lot of time. This American Life is iconic, it's classic, it's feel good, it makes you smile, and it really is the leading star when it comes to audio storytelling.
As I was going through the app and I'm learning to navigate and use it, there are things that are clearly New York Times, right? The design, the logo, the look and feel, a lot of it is classic New York Times. But the things like other publishers being on the platform is not classic New York Times. The New York Times was the paper of record, and it was its own walled garden. And tell us about that conversation, that agreement within the team that we're going to break out of those walls.
It's a very good question. The Times acquired Autumn, which is an app that has world-class narrators reading the New Yorker, the Atlantic, some of the longest form of great journalism in America, which sadly few of those magazines are left. And when the Times acquired them, they have now, when we launched this app, folded into our app as well. So we have certain deals with certain publishers to bring a couple of their stories every month, whether it's a new cover story by New York Mag, it's in our app. And so what I love most about the Times is it's and this is not the first time this Times has experimented. I don't know if you remember NYT Now, Shri, back in the day when it was curating both Times and non-Times content. And so when we look at our audio app, we're looking at it as a listening experience. And now the Times, can try and copy This American Life storytelling to an exact T, but it wouldn't be This American Life for a reason. So hence these partnerships. And I want to give credit to, again, Steph Price, Sam Dolnick, who went out and sought these partnerships. But for us, what that means is now we can host and be home to the best sort of audio journalism that other publishers want. And I think the Times more and more as sort of a mainstay in international journalism can also help lift a tide that lifts all boats when it comes to a new way of consuming great stories, no matter you don't have to look at a screen. So I hope more publishers join us and want to join us, because I think this is going to show us a lot about what we can try next in our industry.
I'm glad you reminded me of the New York Times Now app. You can see I'm going to just put on the screen the number of times on Twitter I would talk about NYT app. I was its biggest fan, and
Really?
I loved that it broke through and had that other content in there. And I would talk to people at the Times all the time about the New York Times Now. And you can see that when it went away in August 2016, I said I praised the New York Times app in all my digital classes. Sorry, it's going away. We'll need to re-download the main app. That meant for a couple of years I didn't touch the regular New York Times app and
Really?
read the Now, and that's what you're doing here now by bringing those others in that format. And I'll also say, for those who may have missed it, it's called AUDM is the app that the Times bought. I didn't know they bought it. And you've often in the New York Times Magazine online, you will see the option to listen. And so now I guess that's all going to be here on the app itself, the audio app itself. Folks, we're talking to Shreeya Sinha about various things to do with the new New York Times audio app. If you're on iOS, you have an iPhone, an iPad, please download it, try it out, give her feedback. What is the feedback mechanism? Is there a button they can press to
Yes.
give you raves and complaints?
Absolutely. Praise and any and all feedback, totally welcome. There's a settings module up at the top. And from there, you can report a bug, you can visit our help center or just get support. You can also tweet at me directly or find me anywhere on social, and I'd be happy to just get your feedback.
Look at Corey watching from Vermont. Welcome to the show. And everyone, tag your friends. We're talking about New York Times audio app and also the New York Times and the news of the week. Another crazy week of news. We're on live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn. We do the show every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Let me ask
And
you.
I was just before you go, Sri. Sorry, Corey Ann is a colleague of yours, Shreya, right? Is she with?
Corey Beach is on this call from Vermont, and she is one of the product leaders who helped build and put together this app from my
Oh,
early days of working on it. So, hi, Corey, great colleague, great friend of mine as well.
Yeah.
let's give you a chance also to shout out some more people so that folks can I mean, this is a lot of obviously inside baseball, but we have a lot of journalists who are watching, so I'll give you a chance to name check some friends and colleagues.
Oh, how wonderful. Thank you, Shri. Well, I would definitely want to thank my team. I had to really put together a team of journalists, editors, audio technologists. So I want to give a shout out to Mukul Devachan, Tyler Cabot, Laura Kim, Zoe Murphy, Dan Levin, Pierre Antoine, Jake Lucas, Julia, Tar Godwin, Esla, um, Sam Dolnick, Mark Lacey. Um, and to the whole product team of the Times, Alex Raynard, Corey B, Jamal, Shema. I'm going to forget names. I feel like I'm at the Oscars and music is about to play. I was not expecting to go this, but one of the blessings of working at the Times is that you're surrounded by brilliant, smart people. And so I'm just lucky I get to work with them. And, as a journalist in the newsroom for about a decade, working with product and getting on their roadmap and understanding all of the stuff, I think, as you always sort of taught me back in journalism, it's like, it's not just writing and reporting and having a great story, but what's the visions, what's the visual, what's the presence, what's the community, what's the conversation, who's guiding it, how are you following through with it? And so for me, this app and where I am at the Times is a chance to really be at the intersection of journalism and audience and product and operations.
Well, that's so cool. I want to just hear again some of the numbers you mentioned about the Daily, which is the show that everybody knows. You had mentioned some of those numbers. Just remind us again so that people can get a sense of what the audio universe already is, and then you're trying to take that and add on to it and make it even more robust. The audio universe.
Absolutely. So, the Daily has, I think at the end of 2002, 2022, about 130 million downloads per month, and has had sort of historic highs even during COVID. And of course, especially probably because of COVID. And, it's very interesting that the Daily, no one, Lisa Tobin, Sam Dolnick, the makers of it, nobody obviously expected it to be as huge as it is. And capitalizing on that success, the makers of the Daily are the ones who have made this new headlines show, for example. And the headlines show, let me run you through a little bit of the highlights in the app. Number one is from the makers of the Daily, a new short headlines show, which is very similar to what you get on the front page in 10 minutes or less. The host is reporter Annie Coriel. You'll also find New York Times
Another
article.
Columbia School student, just reminding folks.
I just wonder at the J School, if we did a tally how many New York Times people you've sort of seen under your wing, Shreeya, I think it'd be surprising.
Sorry
So
to
we've got
interrupt. Yeah.
So we've got the headlines, reporters discussing 3 big stories of the day, reporter reads, where our reporters tell you about how they found their stories and what surprised them. And so you not only get the reporter reading the story out loud, but you get a more intimate connection with the reporter. And I want to stress that because we're in an AI world right now where you're going to find synthetic voice all over the top of, most articles now. But I think what we've created, and a shout out to John Woo's team at the Times who makes these, is a new format in a way. And of course, what I love the most, and I think what you will find delightful, is short pieces from our culture and lifestyle section. This app, not just news. People need to kick their shoes off, and we're going to surprise and delight you with short guided tours from, say, cooking to new music to how to meditate. So there'll be a lot of escapes as well.
I can't wait to dig in more. I see Pradnya's tagging her friends on LinkedIn. And everyone, please do that. You know someone who loves the daily or loves audio, loves podcasts, and this is your chance to tell them something they may not have heard of yet. And they're going to be grateful that you were the first to tell them about the New York Times audio app. If they have iOS, they can sign up. Otherwise, if they're on Android, they can wait and they'll be able to listen to some of this for free immediately. And then, of course, if they have a subscription, they'll be able to sign up. They'll be able to get the whole thing for free. So this is, if I can say, a kind of direct shot at Apple and Spotify. And I'll leave it to the media experts to see what kind of impact, what kind of predictions they're going to be. But this is an exciting time, and we started by talking about the value of audio at this moment. And I saw a nice note that I'll just pull up here from Ken, who's watching, who says that audio can give a feeling of event with a timed relevance. That's what gave radio great loyalty, he says. And there is something intimate, something powerful about that NPR voice that many of us love so much. Talk a little bit about the voices that you're using. How much of it is that NPR style that some of you will remember Saturday Night Live lampooned very well about 20 years ago? And how much of it are you trying to change so that it's more international, more diverse, a different feel?
Thanks, Shri. And Ken, you're absolutely right. Sorry, I hope the siren.
New York City.
New York City. Ken, you're absolutely right. I think one of the most exciting things about audio is it's actually almost its truest form back to journalism, where you can hear directly from people in your ear. And I think there's something so rich about that. So it sort of wakes the soul, shakes the consciousness, and depending on how it's really put together, and the way we're doing it in our app is with, hearing directly from the source, sound production, real tape from on the ground where you can hear some of the fighting, say, in Ukraine. And in a way that I think people reading have just gotten more jaded towards. you read on your phone, you read on your iPad, you read on your laptop, you read a book. And so no matter what you're doing, it's still screen, screen, screen. And so there's something about audio that is both intimate and I like to think gives you back your time, where you are having an experience, laughing to This American Life. Today's episode is on people who have superpowers or think they do. And so I'm laughing with my dog or doing the laundry or preparing a meal, doing the dishes. And so suddenly the Times is in my life, but in a way that everything in the app is quality, richness, and storytelling. And Shree, you said, oh, sounds like a dig at Apple and Spotify. I think, it is very hard to compete with Apple and Spotify to have New York Times Audio to be their dominant podcast player. There's so much more out there that people listen to besides us. But I think, like the New York Times, this is where you come for news, depth, information, quality, trust, experimentation, and frankly, not the Wild West like most of these other podcatchers are. Shri, you asked me another question. I think I'm forgetting what that second part was.
It's okay. There's so much coming in, so we'll keep going. Rick asked about about contributors, and are you seeking new shows? Are you doing that? Here's also a question from Joyce about the BBC and what kind of inspiration did the BBC give you when Joyce is in small bandwidth places? BBC audio is available.
Great questions. One about how this is working. So I am sort of leading a team that puts together the editorial for the app, and the makers, just like at the New York Times, there's the news desk, the homepage, and the desk make stuff. Paula Schumann, who's the head of audio content at the Times, where the daily, hard fork, the headlines, shorts fall under, has sort of rearranged that so that they can supply the app and make things and learn and develop. So at this point, the contributors who are at the Times are the ones making the shows. So there's a full staff for that. And second question, I'm sorry, Shri.
Was in terms of the BBC and
So
how got it, yeah.
I'm laughing because my deputy is from the BBC and started BBC Sounds, Mukul Devachan. So I'm intimately familiar with the BBC, love the BBC. So I have hired two people from the BBC, Mukul and Zoe Murphy, who have worked on BBC Trending, Voice, Alexa, and they've partnered with our audio producers and editors and product teams to really experiment with things like the daily playlist, which you see. And they've been really hard at work at forging a new voice and identity for this product that we expect and hope millions of listeners will love.
That's great. We have people watching from all over the world, including Neil's mom watching from Seattle. Hello, Auntie. And there's Neil saying
Hi, Mom.
Auntie.
She's usually watching from New York, but she'll watch from anywhere. She actually once came back from India and logged in at 8:30 a.m. from the taxi coming home from the airport. One of our most
we all need loyal listeners and viewers, and so that's great. So yeah, go ahead.
Neil, I hope your mom's listening and she enjoys this interview more than she did some of the earlier ones in which she said that was her favorite. So I'm looking
I'm
forward.
sure it will be. We still have a little bit ways to go, but I'm sure
Yes.
it will be by the end of the show.
Folks,
we still want to make sure we hear some of the audio from the app. We definitely want you to play some audio.
Yeah, right after this, so let's do that. Sonal Bahel says, I find podcasting and audio in general the most intimate way to connect with my audience. We spend an hour with me and my guests 3 times a month. Nothing else comes close. Happy to catch this live. I interviewed Shreeya's sister on my career podcast. She's amazing and left a big impression. So let's do a shout out to sister, please.
Oh my gosh, what a small world. Thank you so much for joining in, Sonal. And my sister, Shreeya Sinha, she is an entrepreneur and a smaller Asian woman than I am who has broken many glass ceilings. in the private equity world who's actually taken up Vipassana and meditating. And so that's what Sonal's referring to. But yeah, I find, I keep saying this, but I think there's a new growing cohort of people. And Shreeya, I don't know if you'll ever be part of this, who are just sick of looking at their phones. Would
Oh,
you
absolutely.
ever? Yeah?
I do look at my phone too much, but I will say one of the things I like about having the Alexa around the house, the Alexa units around the house is in the shower or outside when you're cooking, you just say, Alexa, play CNN or Alexa, play a podcast you like, and it just plays it. And of course, that won't work with the Times Audio, right? Because you're keeping it on your platform rather than that. Or might that happen? Has that come up as an option at all?
As we have just released, I think there are many new improvements coming. And I hope being more seamlessly integrated in some of these third-party platforms and, new ways to get into people's homes. I'm acutely aware that I'm on the East Coast and there's a whole, for instance, community out there driving. So we hear you. I hear you. I think, the Times has worked on this for a very long time, but I think part of releasing it sort of into the wild is let's make it the best it can be with feedback. After a while, I think we were like, we just need to release this because, working on this for so many years, it's like you're hearing the same voices, you're talking amongst yourself. So it's very important for us to release this. So yes, all of this feedback is great and really appreciated.
Excellent. We're about to hear some of the audio from there, and we'll go back to that question about the voices that you put on the air. There's that kind of standardized broadcast voice in American radio and television. How much are you going to break from that, from the NPR voice? I'm going to ask you that in just a second. But to those of you who might be listening and again saying, as I am, like, boy, this is a really like big big move by the Times to kind of own this, own their own content, own their own audience rather than giving it away the way everybody did at first. Reminds me so much of what the Wall Street Journal did. The Wall Street Journal from day one said we're going to be a paid service. We're going to, the website when it started, I'm talking about now 20 plus years ago, and that laid the seeds of their own success, right? Because they're so good, because the people are able to afford it, because it's a business write-off. People subscribe to the Wall Street Journal from day one when Rich Jaroslawski and Neil Buddy and others worked on that. And it made such a difference to the success of the journal website and the journal audio and video and everything else that came after. And so this I think of as a moment in the journalism world where the Times says we're going to own our audience instead of giving it all away and hope that Facebook will be nice to us this week. Let's hope that somebody else will be nice to us. So let's hear some audio. Here's Dipti saying, consuming content and audio is becoming increasingly more appealing. Yes, AirPods are taking over from phone screen time. Very, very important. Yoy says people love the radio and there's just so much going on here. So many comments coming. Chris is watching from NYC. Folks, tell your friends who love audio to watch this show. They can join us now, join us later, and now we're going to hear some audio. So tell us and set this up for us, please.
Sure. And, Shri, I just wanted to respond to one thing you said is just for people joining us, why has the Times launched an app? A little bit of a recap. This is the first app the New York Times has launched in 9 years. I think when I was in it, I didn't believe it. According to the press release, that is true. But this also means that this is part of the Times' broader strategy to offer a wide range of products that are in people's lives morning till evening, whether it's cooking in the evening, Wordle in the morning, audio for your commute. And so now they have fully fledged products that are interconnected. And this is part of Meredith Levian's strategy. So there's 6 fully fledged products now. And so figuring out how audio fits in, I like to think of us as the crown jewel of the bundle right now. But it's part of the Times' strategy to get subscribers as you said, Shree, have really saved a lot of standing media publications today. You know, I feel like from the beginning of journalism till now, I've seen a full evolution of the rise and fall of BuzzFeed, Vice, Fox, you name it. And so those publications that said journalism is worth paying for, and what the Times is now doing, saying pay for our journalism and here's other services that we can now offer, is a way to retain and get new subscribers so that we can keep funding our journalism. But enough said, let me take you through our product, NYT Audio. Neil, do you think you could run through? Thank you. So if we just pause there, what you are seeing is a playlist at the top, curated each weekday morning from the day's headlines to the daily, and a narrated article, as well as the short. So let me play you an example of what the headlines sounds like.
Hundreds and thousands of migrants are trying to cross, raising concerns about whether local officials and the U.S. officials have the ability to handle them all.
President Erdogan looms large over the story of modern Turkey, but he's really heading into this election with much, much stronger headwinds than he's ever faced in the past.
What the Met did this week in a seismic change for the institution and for the field was to take a more proactive stance in essentially investigating itself.
From the New York Times, it's the headlines. I'm Annie Coriel. Today's Friday, May 12th. Here's what we're covering.
So when you press play all at the top of the screen every day, you will get about an hour-long playlist that starts off with about 10 minutes of the headlines, taking you to the three most important stories our journalists are focusing on. Then you'll get the daily, of course. And if you keep going through this slide, Neil, or press play, you'll get the daily, you'll get shorts, which I'll talk about, and this is our new opinion show. So what you get is a range of Times stories narrated out loud by Times reporters. You'll see all of our new podcasts, including excerpts that we do. This is a new podcast, Hard Fork, Kevin Roos, Casey Newton. If you haven't seen it, check it out. That's the run-up with Estad Herndon. The magazine stand. This is where Autumn formerly was. This is where our other publishers live, including Rolling Stone, New York Magazine, Outside Magazine, and world-class narrators do hours and hours of research, get the pronunciation right, and help produce these amazing magazine stories. So let's pause on that for a second. Shorts are a new format for the app. They're short pieces from our culture and lifestyle reporters that offer surprises and delight. And I'm really excited about what it means for people, because this app is a balance of news and features and likes to hang out with you in your afternoons and weekends. So let me play something. Crash course in the Dominican music of Dembo.
When I was a kid, I would go on these trips to the Dominican Republic to visit my family. We would make sure we went to the beach at some point. It's about, 2 hours away from Santiago, where my family is from. On the way to the beach, you would often see these vans that were really just, had huge speakers, just covered in subwoofers. There would be a lot of gasolineras, which, these gas stations where a lot of these vans would just kind of park. And it was basically like as soon as you pulled up, I could just feel the bass.
Shreeya,
Not what you
I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt you. Of all the content that you're talking about, where you have this original work from the Times, but you also have things like the Athletic and New Yorker, not New York Times branded content, even though New York Times owns the Athletic. What's the mix between New York Times branded content and other sources?
That's a great question. I just want to say for the record, there's no branded content in NYT Audio. Everything is original journalism, podcast
Okay.
shows that have been created with an editorial team at, say, The Athletic, for example. And so we have a team of journalists every day who are curating this app to meet the news and cultural moments of day. And so every single piece is painstakingly looked at, listened to, framed in a certain way for this experience of a set of stories every day that you get on the Today screen. So, for example, The Athletic, it's got sports fans who can enjoy a variety of sports through these podcasts. So, you're asking the wrong person about sports, but you got the Andy Staples show. You've got some amazing names in the industry, or Mark Chapman on the Premier League. And it's more of a sports fans banter rather than like, here's the news updates on the sport. It's like where fans can come together. So everything that's in the app is something that we've chosen to partner up, has great stories, offers a service value, gets people up to speed, informs, or delights.
Sure. I want to just bring in a quick comment before we hear more audio. Sonal was commenting that the New York Times does tend to pioneer and stay ahead of the curve, and buying Wordle at its peak was a genius move. So I think this goes up there as another genius move in terms of setting up the audio app. That's my prediction. Our friend Rose Horowitz, who works with us at Digimentors, does a lot of work with Twitter Spaces. Do you plan on doing anything with Twitter Spaces? Not necessarily, in the app, but to help promote the app.
Rose, that's an excellent idea. We work a lot with Twitter Spaces, and we work with the live events team run by Elaine Chan at the Times, and we work to record events. It could be talking about the new Still Processing series, or it could be with Andy Ross Sorkin about something, and we record it and edit it and put it in our app. I guess we're such journalists and we don't promote ourselves that we didn't think about it for ourselves, but I think that's a good idea. Maybe you will join us there as well.
Absolutely. Follow Shreeya on Twitter. She's at Shreeya Sinha. I'll put her information back on the screen. If you follow her on Twitter, when they go live on Twitter Spaces, you'll get the notification. So you want to make sure you do that. So was there more that you wanted to show with the app?
There is one more thing I wanted to show. And I think one thing for me that is huge is I actually think the New York Times is now giving you time back. I was actually a subscriber and consumer of Audm well before the Times acquired Audm, because I could not get through, after a day of journalism, a 5,000-word essay on X. And so I was like, I need this in my life. And so what I'm really excited about is these narrated articles.
Oh, yeah.
You can find a spiritual, contemplative moment on the commuter vessel known as the Staten Island Ferry. I'm Dan Barry. I've been at the Times for nearly 28 years, and I was born and raised in New York. It has always struck me that one of the great wonders of this city is the Staten Island Ferry.
This is a beautiful article by Dan Barry, and he's telling you about his life in New York before he reads you this amazing, amazing piece. If anyone wants to listen to poetry, definitely check out this piece. It's on the homepage as well by Dan
Absolutely.
Barry. It's
Dan Barry's
called
a friend of the show. He was a guest last December, and we love him. We love Dan Barry.
Yeah,
Um,
and well, I'm so glad
Writing.
that he is working with you on this piece about the Staten Island Ferry. So we have about half an hour left with Shreeya Sinha. We're going to come back to the app. We're also going to look at the paper, and we read the paper every Sunday with friends, guests, etc. Some of them are from the New York Times. Some of them are observers of the New York Times or people who are just interesting. Brian Stelter did his first big in-depth video interview after he left CNN a couple of weeks ago. And here's Shreeya with us today. When I read with the Times people, what I'm looking for is your take on anything you see here that, any inside baseball you can share or things that catch your eye or colleagues' names or anything. I know you've been heads down doing the app for the last so many months, so you may not have had a chance to even look at the paper today. But as I look at it, just jump in at any point, and otherwise I'll just keep reading the paper or reading or pointing out things in the paper. So the front page of the Times is criticizing Biden. Adams diverges from Democrats. For a long time, many of us have said that a former Republican who is now the Democratic mayor of New York will often go back to his Republican connections, and that's what he's doing there. In New York prisons, few are fired for brutality. Union contacts. Yep.
Just one thing on the migrant story. I'm really fascinated by this for a reason, because it's happening across a lot of liberal progressive states. I mean, there was a story just the other day in the New York Times about Chicago, which was sanctuary city, open armed. They're starting to feel the strains of a migrant influx, especially during a moment when it's very fraught politically. And so the same things are now happening across these cities. In fact, I think there was discussion about putting migrants in New York on Roosevelt Island, which I used to live on. So, the situation is coming to all cities, and it's really, yep, exactly that story. So,
And they're also in the Roosevelt Hotel is now being converted into a place that's welcoming of migrants. Here, speaking of migrants, stranded Afghans risk crossing a jungle, U.S. allies on an odyssey through the Americas. And there's so much pain in what happens with these migrants. The desert provides a new paradise for Hawaiians. So these are Hawaiians who are moving to Las Vegas. Why in the world? That's the kind of story you don't go looking for, and you find it on a Sunday morning on the front page of the New York Times. Eliza Fawcett story. This is a fast-moving story about Bakhmut, which is a prize in the Ukraine war, and Russia claims it's got it. This morning, I saw a news alert that Zelensky was ambiguous when he was asked about this, and you know that he is a very strong-willed, very direct person. So the fact that he was ambiguous might mean that it in fact has fallen, but we don't know, and it changes all the time. And then a big story in the world of literature: Martin Amis has died, author who cast an acid eye on the excesses of modern life. And Shreeya, you may not know this, but every week I talk about how much I love obits. And so I want to know, is there a obit section in audio? I would love to hear just old obits being read by somebody.
I don't know if you know this, but I worked on obituaries. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. Oh my God.
Oh my God, I love obituaries. Obituaries are, I think, some of the most beautifully written Times pieces. Yes, I used to work on obituaries, and suddenly everybody died that year. So whether it was Prince or Ali, I was sort of known as the angel of death in the newsroom, because if I came to you, it was because I was like, oh, I'm hearing rumors, so-and-so. And so we'd have to sort of update the obit. And some of the obit writers have now passed away, Shree, and the obit is still going on because that person hasn't died. So it's a fascinating profile of how someone lived rather than how they died.
And I want to give a shout out to Amy Padnani, who was Obits editor and created Overlooked, the very important section that covered people, mostly women, mostly people of color, who were overlooked by the Times when they passed contemporaneously. And then it's kind of, and I remember Rani Jhansi Rani Lakshmi of Jhansi. This is a great leader against the fight against the British in 1857, which is after the New York Times existed. And I mean, she died after the Times was already born. They did not cover her death, and the Times did an overlooked obituary on her. And we had her on the show, and you can go back and find the archived show and listen to Amy talk about what it's like to work on the obits desk at the Times. Here,
I want to show people that we've got a bunch of Overlooked in the app as well.
Yes.
So we're a big fan of obits as well.
Okay, that's great. And then, for people who haven't been following the Times, here it is. Rani of Jhansi, India's warrior queen who fought the British, died. And this is one of those overlooked. And Neil, can you show me the byline on that? Can you just go up close? I can't. My eyes are so bad.
Yeah,
Let's see.
Alicia, of course. I know Alicia.
Can you just pull that up? It's it's Alicia's piece. Yes, that is. She's great, and so important that they ran that. Let's also show people here on the paper you're looking at. How the Times has changed. Here's here to help. How to clean a fan. You can't imagine that the Times, in some of its earlier incarnations would have covered this, but this is part of the service journalism that has always been part of the Times and other newspapers, whether it's recipes or other things. But here is how to clean your fan on the international section. A migration enforcer Europe can live with. So yet another story about migration, full page in the New York Times after 2 or 3 pages on the piece on the front page. The G7 summit is going on right now. Big story. Envoys call for equality in Japan riles the right. The right in Japan, land of my birth, is always being riled up. Zelensky appears at G7 to deliver a personal plea for help. A striking photo here of Zelensky in a handout photograph meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Hiroshima, Japan. And part of the story has been how India has stood by its ally, Russia, in a way that has surprised many people. And so I want to read what happened here. I missed this piece of news. Behind the scenes, leaders wrangle over ambitious climate commitment, and Biden is not alone in lacking support at home. So are the other 6 leaders of the G7 summit. Here's more about Ukraine. The war still goes on, and there's so much to talk about there. And here's the stranded Afghans risk crossing a jungle. And that reminds me, I don't know if we got the full answer on the pronunciations and the sounds and the voices you use. I just did it myself. I said Afghans on the front page, and here I said Afghans. How do you decide what kind of voices, accents to put on the line? Some of us, you do what's called code switching when we talk. Whenever people say to me, Sri, well, because I was born and lived in so many countries, I grew up in 7, 8 countries, so that's why I'm so confused. But when you speak French, you try to get that French accent as right as possible. When you're doing stories from Haiti, you want to have that, that kind of the right accents, things like that. So, what have you done in terms of getting the voices? We talked earlier about that classic NPR voice that so many of us love, but so many of us also say, why does it have to be like that? Why does that have to be standard broadcast so that Americans can understand when you are in fact a global platform now?
I'm laughing, Shri, because I'm probably confused too, as someone who was raised in Africa with a British school background to then living in India and then coming to America. I think there's definitely some of that, but it's a really good question. When we acquired Autumn, one of the reasons why the Times was so interested in them is because of their high quality narration. And this was started by Christian Brink and Ryan Wegner. And they also did weeks of research They spoke to people in their native accents. They spoke to people about how to read names. They picked certain narrators. So you might find if there's a long magazine story about India, you might be listening to an Indian narrator who can easily pronounce all of the Indian names fluidly, so it doesn't seem like you're getting tripped up. And so when you look at the magazine narration in our app, it is really to the standards where things are name checked repeatedly, pronunciations are checked repeatedly, because publishers are also trusting us to get their stories right in a way that is authentically and accurately in audio expressing that.
Thank you. And I know many of us will be watching and listening carefully about this. Here's Mary C. Curtis, great friend of the show, great columnist, journalist, everyone. Check her out on the various platforms. She says, obits are wonderful stories of her life. My friend and former New York Times colleague Richard Sandomir writes them now. Overlooked is a necessary feature. And so shout out to Richard, who has covered so many different topics at the Times. And by the way, folks, I'm holding my phone because I forgot my tripod today in traveling to DC. If you've just joined us, we've got about 20 minutes left with Shreeya Sinha. This is the New York Times Read Along. Every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, we read the print New York Times out loud, or if I'm in a different city, we read the local paper. We're always looking for great guests. You don't have to have anything to do with the Times or even journalism. If you've got interesting takes on the media, you've got a book or something you're trying to promote, we'd love to talk to you. So reach out to my colleague and executive producer, Neil Parekh, at Neil Parekh on Twitter. And you can email him, neil@digimentors.group. That's our company. And what Digimentors does is produce shows like this, virtual shows, conferences, as well as hybrid shows as well, and programs. We do digital marketing, we do strategic communications, training and workshops, staffing and recruiting of digital talent. And I can tell you that I just did my first ever generative AI workshop. When I've done, I did it with a very important client, nonprofit client in Atlanta last week. Neil and I and our colleague Jenny Lazarus were down there, and I did my social media workshop, which I said I put in a number 25,000. 75 and 25, and that's 25,000 attendees all over the world from 75 cities in 20 countries. 25 countries have attended my social media workshops over the last decade or so. And my generative AI ChatGPT, I said 000 because no one has attended my workshops on that topic because I'd not done one, and I'm now rolling them out all over the planet. So if you would like a virtual version or a lunch and learn, or bring me into a conference to talk about what I call the non-scary guide to AI and how it can help in your industry. I'm already talking to a group of medical professionals about what they can do and what they should understand about AI. So reach out to me, Sri, at digimentors.group, or tweet me at Sri, or just say, Sri, come on down to whatever it is you're doing. I want to talk about this. This is important, but as with social, as with email, when email first came around, I used to do workshops on how to use email. This is that moment where there's so much confusion, so much misinformation. I want to be as practical and helpful as useful as possible. I call it service journalism with service teaching and training. So we can do 20 minutes or we can do 3 hours in depth, and there's still so much to do. And I'm learning every step of the way as well. Let's get back to the paper. We have so much to cover. That's Shreeya Sinha joining us. She's talking about the New York Times audio app. While we're talking, go onto your iPhone, iOS, on your iPad, download New York Times audio. Just NYT Audio gets you there. And even if you're not yet a subscriber, you can get some free preview content. She said limited time, so jump on there and grab that. I also heard the name Annie Coriel, who is a former student at Columbia J School as well, and she's on the Headline Show. Tell us how Headlines is different from The Daily, because some people may say, oh, wait, isn't that the same thing?
That's a great question. The Headlines, hi everyone, Shreeya for those who are joined. The Headlines is a news show where Times reporters discuss 3 big stories of the day in under 10 minutes. And it's hosted by Annie Coriel. It's got a team of several producers around it. And it's almost like you're getting off the elevator at the Times and you're an editor running after the executive editor, and you have, few minutes to say, what is this story? Why should I care? I have 30, 60 seconds less. And so it's by the makers of the Daily. It's in 10 minutes. And what the headline seeks to do is just catch you up and be with you in your pocket, whatever you have to do for your morning commute or your morning essentials. And I know we're looking at the newspaper, but I just wanted to mention how things really do feel full circle, which is that what myself and my team are doing every morning is creating an audio report for the Times on the Today screen, which is the first screen you get when you log into the NYT audio app. And so just like the front page, this is a predictable structure. It is time bound. There's kind of set visual layouts where you can sort of move across news, opinion, culture, and get that sort of news depth and serendipity. So it's funny in some ways. We are giving something that is a little akin to what the paper is that you're reading.
And as we continue with the paper, Shreeya, if you can point out if there's particular articles we're looking at that you either have in the app or that you're working on, what the connection is between the hard copy and the app, that would be really, really interesting.
And look at the
I know
story.
Sri is looking at Sunday
Yeah.
Styles. We'll
Look at the story where the bees are famous and the goats wear cashmere. Welcome to Flamingo Estate, a hilltop in Los Angeles. We love the Sunday Styles. There's so much always to read in here. We had one of the wedding vows writers join us, and that was so great to have Kate Dottie on here. Facing the fallout of a spectacular betrayal, Modern Love, which is so huge online and in different formats. We've had Daniel Jones on Valentine's Day join us and talk. You can find all of these folks on our archives of the New York Times app. Sorry, not New York Times app, sorry. The Digimentors website, digimentors.group. You can find it and you will see this Modern Love column there as well. Folks, if you haven't retweeted the show or reposted, including, I'm just checking that Shreeya had a chance to share it with her audience as well. And tell your friends and family to watch us, folks, as we go in here. I also love, go ahead.
Shri, I love that you're checking on my work like I'm still a student. Like, let me see if she's actually done what I told her to do 40 minutes ago. But I wanted to chime in and say we actually do have the full archive of Modern Love. We've got the show. We've got tiny love stories. And a lot of your favorite shows, we have the complete archive in our app. That is a big distinction between Apple and the audio app, especially for This American Life. You might get 10 of the most recent shows, but if you want to listen to Ira Glass's favorite of all time, that's in our app.
Wow, that's some people want to subscribe just for that because we know how big.
I mean, yeah.
Gathering for the dawn of a new century 21. This is a brand many people will know if they've been to New York and elsewhere. I guess it's coming back. I love Social Cues and Philip Galance, and here is, I'm going to read a question to you. There's no right or wrong answer, as you know. So let's see. My boyfriend and I are going on vacation with his parents and brother. His parents are paying for the trip. They sent a link to his vacation house, and we see we'll be sharing a bedroom with my boyfriend's brother that has 2 queen beds. As a 27-year-old woman, I find this prospect uncomfortable. At the same time, I don't want to complain about a free vacation. Thoughts? So this is the girlfriend asking the question of Philip.
Okay.
Please follow him. He's at Social Q Philip. Go ahead.
Listen, Social Q Philip. The fact that you even have to ask this question, it's uncomfortable to listen to and is making me want to cringe. That's an answer in tweet-worthy length, right, Shri?
Yes, that's perfect. That is perfect. Yep.
Shri, I have a question for you, actually, based on This American Life today. Would you rather have invisibility or flight?
Invisibility or the ability to fly. So, yeah, absolutely to fly, because that would shorten distances, bring me places. I love flying, but I love travel, but it's on top of everything else. Now you worry about your carbon footprint. So I'm hoping this flying ability comes with no carbon footprint. And part of this is I am recovering from driving yesterday 3 generations of our family and 10 suitcases in a minivan from New York to DC in the worst possible rain, zero visibility. It was terrible. So flying sounds wonderful at the moment, even though after Memorial Day, travel in America becomes absolutely horrendous. Even though it's never good at any time, flying becomes really, really bad.
But Shreya, with the ability to fly, is there a limit on luggage? Because Sri would have been had trouble yesterday. How many bags did you have?
Oh, at least 10. At least 10 bags. Yep. That was rough. Let's look at the business cover. Is the barber to the stars is also a star. And these architects of swag, love that term, work closely with celebrities, post regularly on IG, and earn 6 figures. That is great. Amazon is everywhere, and that makes it vulnerable. The company's vast delivery network is notably susceptible to work stoppages. I also want to say that I had a friend from Australia join me in a walk of New York, and I invite others to invite me on walks. And she doesn't know almost anything about Amazon because Amazon doesn't work the same way, or if at all, in Australia, because it's such a big country. It's hard for them to make money delivering in that giant country. So that was refreshing to meet somebody who knew so little about Amazon. And Sunday Opinion cover is The Tyranny of the Best. We reoriented our lives around chasing the top-rated everything, but to what end? Interesting. The Times should ask that, of course, because they rate and rank, movies and books and all those things. And of course, Wirecutter ranks and rates things as well.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
there's the New York Times for you. It caters to you philosophically as well as actually, I actually went to the Wirecutter offices. Shout out to Ben Furman, but they really do consider themselves as not like markety, gimmicky product type where they're just selling you anything. They actually do hours and hours of testing on every single thing. So it was a fun little excursion there.
Yeah. The 4 freedoms, according to Republicans. This is not what Franklin Roosevelt had in mind. And can the strike save Hollywood? I want to tell you that my newsletter was last week about the strike and why you should care. And you can find that on sreenet.substack.com. Sreenet.substack.com. Would love all of you to subscribe. And it's free, of course. And I also... here's something funny. I wrote a column called Ross Douthat's White Guy Confidence last year or so, because Ross is so wrong so often, but I won't have you comment on a fellow New York Times person. An insider's view of an officer's...
Wait, what I want to laugh at was that a Freudian slip that AI wrote your column? Because this is one crazy. I mean, we talk about Facebook and pivots, and Facebook dials it up and all the publishers flinch and vice versa. But AI, I mean, when you check out what Ezra Klein is saying in the Ezra Klein podcast, which is just very intellectual and heavy and heady and deep, and also Hard Fork, which is the tech podcast, it really feels like in the next 2 months, the world is in for a massive transformation. And these Hollywood writers are right in the middle of it as this is happening, and as companies are describing, what they can or can't commit to ethically at this point.
I will just, if Neil can bring back my column, if you'll just scroll up. I did not have AI write the column, but I did ask AI to make a cartoon for me about the strike, and that's what they did here with cartoon. I said, write cartoon writers, a cartoon about the Writers Guild strike, and this is what Jasper.ai created, and that looks pretty darn good. But the piece is... the newsletter is created by my newsletter guru, Zach Peterson, who works out in Prague. And that distributed work is what, my tiny company at DigiVentures is doing. So I imagine you're also making use of people all over the world as you're doing your project. We have about 10 minutes left. and we have so much to cover, including the Times Magazine. I see it's listed as a publisher, as almost like a partner on the app. So talk about that and look at this cover. Should you be in therapy? Isn't everybody else? And certainly when you're on the Upper West Side in New York, it certainly feels like everybody's in therapy. And that's a very serious topic now. Obviously, this, I think there are multiple stories about therapy here. Look at this. Does therapy work? Therapy was not something black boys did, or Indian boys, or there are so many people of color who don't go for therapy. Domestic disturbance, what your therapist doesn't tell you. Let the body do the talking. Leaving therapy made it possible to imagine going back. And the darkest time. How do you actually help teenagers who are thinking about taking their own lives? Such an important
And
issue.
I just want to mention, the reason why, first of the New York Times Magazine has a voice, has an identity that's separate from the newsroom. It's run by Jake Silverstein.
Who, by the way, is going to do an episode of the Read Along, a special episode from his office, rather than disturbing him on a Sunday when the magazine lands, is released kind of internally on Thursdays or Fridays. One of these days, we're going to go in and read. The Sunday New York Times is going to have a Saturday, is going to have a weekday edition, just the way we went to the printing press of the New York Times. I find this in my archive, and we met Mike Connors, who runs the printing press. What a great!
He's wonderful. He's a wonderful guy. I just wanted to show you, Shree, that we are experimenting more and more with simultaneous publication. So this is the magazine therapy issue that you can listen to in our app right now. So magazine stories end up being, 45 minutes. So how to help a suicidal teen. I'm a couples therapist. Something is happening in relationships. And so this is the therapy issue right here.
Excellent. Thank you. Deepthi said goodbye already. Great. Thanks. See you next time. Thank you, Deepthi, for watching. We're not done. We have a couple of minutes left. Jonathan says, I've rather done well with Wirecutter. That's really important. And Neil is writing in here, says, does therapy really work? Let's unpack that. Research shows that counseling delivers great benefits to many people, but it's hard to say exactly what that means to you. I'm also looking here at Arts and Leisure. Grief is a funny thing. A new generation of stand-up comics is mining the heartbreaking loss of a loved one for ambitious shows. How did we get here? And some of you know I lost my mother in January, and we're celebrating her tonight at the Karuna Charities Gala in DC tonight in Gaithersburg, where I am. And this is the book that she wrote. She finished 99% of it, and we brought it home for her, and we're so proud of her. But, sometimes we joke and we have to laugh because grief, you can't always just be thinking in one way, because otherwise you'll be crying all the time. And so that's important. So that's the cover of the Arts and Leisure section. And the book review.
Congratulations on the book, Shree, and I'm so sorry again about your mom.
Thank you. The book review is To the Death. You can't applaud Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah's thrilling debut novel, Chain Gang All-Stars, without getting blood on your hands. Wow. And that's Giri Nathan's review. And I just did that there. I almost said Giri Nathan, but some Indians go by Nathan instead of Nathan. It really depends, right? So you want to pronounce it the way they want it pronounced. And that's so interesting. And tell me any book review connection to what you're doing.
Yeah, we have the book review podcast in our app as well. The new head of sort of all of these of the book review is Gilbert Cruz. And so stay tuned to new things. We actually had some Pulitzer winning authors on the book review podcast. So that's in the app too. All and right. I'm sure summer's coming up, beach reading, that sort of thing is happening.
I that's what I was thinking, that one of the reasons you would want to launch it right now rather than waiting till the fall is that whole lot of time that some people are privileged to have vacations and go on the beach and do things. So they will be listening for sure. So I'm going to pause here as we wrap up. I'm going to have Neil come back. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to get some final thoughts from Shreeya Sinha. While we're doing this, folks, download the New York Times audio app, NYT Audio. Follow her on Twitter at Shreeya Sinha. This show will go immediately back on the air, recorded will be available. The recording will be available on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on our digimentors.group website. We've been doing this for 8 years almost. Please tell your friends, and if you'd like to sponsor what we're doing, reach out to us, Sri@digimentors.group, Sri@digimentors.group, and a big shout out to Muckrack, our sponsor of the show. So Neil, back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sri. What a great episode with Shreeya. And we're not done yet. We will bring her back on. But as Sri was mentioning, we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Muckrack. They've been a longtime supporter of the work that we're doing and the New York Times Read Along. So thank you to Muckrack. And we also want to remind you that this is a production of Digimentors, as Sri mentioned earlier in the show. We do digital marketing, events, strategic communications. We also do trainings and workshops and help with recruiting. A programming note, we will not have a show next weekend. It's Memorial Day. We'll take Memorial Day Sunday off, but we will be back on June 4th. So we look forward to seeing you then. And Sri, we are thrilled. We want to make sure we bring Shreeya back on to close out the show and finish our discussion of the app. So we'll bring her back. Shreeya, thank you so much. This has been really great.
Thank you guys so much for having me. And it's so timely that this app just launched and I got to share it with you all first, really, for me to really get a chance. I've been so in it the last week. So thank you so much for having me. And huge supporter of Shri and Neil and what you guys are doing. Thank you for keeping this journalism community going.
Thank you. So before you go, I do want to look at the wall behind you. I see an international New York Times. I see a lot of black and white photography. I see a guitar and some plants. So talk about any or all of those things.
Okay, there's a lot of stuff here. I wouldn't say any of it really means anything at this point, but I will say
you were a DJ once?
I'm a wannabe lot of things as well, but what you're seeing here is front page of the International New York Times. Is when I went to Varanasi in India, specifically talking about how the Ganges is a symbolism for Modi's power back when he was running for the first election.
Wow. So that's from 2014. Yeah. Front page story.
Way back. Yeah, I was on the international desk at that point. And then what you're seeing here is actually something I'm really proud of. On the national desk, I worked on a piece trying to look at the visual expression of addiction. And what you're actually seeing up here are the phases of opioid addiction. It's a crazy story. We interviewed dozens of people at different stages, came up with the stages, then went through the emotional experience of the stages, gave those emotions to an interpretive dancer who wore all black and then sort of like made the motions of the emotions. And then a digital creator, Zach Lieberman, took that and made it into what Neil is so fast and about to show you. So I was really proud of this work.
And we want to, look at that, so powerful. And our colleague and friend, Lippy Roy, Dr. Lippy Roy is an addiction specialist. She has her own shows, but she's been on multiple shows for us throughout COVID. And she, I'm sure, knows this piece and the story as well. Now tell us about the guitar.
I used to memorize chords and notes, and I didn't learn music theory. So now I'm back to the beginning, and somebody already broke the chord, and I got to go to Guitar Center. So let's just say right now it's a prop, okay? Some people are still figuring it out in New York City 10 years later.
Yeah, and we did talk about Columbia Journalism School. I want to give you a chance to give a shout out to your undergrad school.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to give a shout out to all my professors, June Cross, Laura Muha, um, and Angie, Janelle, Courtney, Jay Ritchie. We did a rap thing for J School. Remember the roast that we did? So the four of us
Yeah,
sort
every
of
year the
did.
students roasted the faculty, and I was the subject of many roasts. Jonathan says, "Great show to listen to. Thank you." But talk about your undergrad school also.
Yeah, so I went to Brandeis University, 20 minutes outside of Boston, and it was a liberal arts school. I had actually come from the foothills of the Himalayas before then, so I didn't really know anything about it, except that I heard it was a good school. And I actually ended up becoming the first non-white student body president and third woman.
Wow.
So I was in politics before I went into journalism, I guess, but my old college roommates, Liana, Feli, and not. Anyways, if this is really an Oscar shout out, I just want to thank my family, my husband Kush, my New York Times family, and this is the time when I need a cool song to walk me off stage.
That's funny. I do want to say that there is a kind of Brandeis Columbia pipeline, and the OG of that pipeline is Walt Mossberg, the guru of tech reporters and tech editors and tech columnists, who was in the class of 1970 at Columbia and came from Brandeis. So, yeah.
Shri, I just have to mention somebody who's joined this chat, something I did not mention, but my first big break in journalism that got me an Emmy nomination and a DuPont was about violence against women in India. It was this multimedia film by MediaStorm featuring Walter Estrada, and I got one of the first women who was talking about since the abortion based on gender was banned coming out in Delhi. And Ruchira Gupta just joined this chat, and
Oh my
she's an
God.
anti-trafficking hero. I went to her school. I think it was in Bihar. I think it was in my early 20s. And I stayed there and I went and saw the school of hers where she is literally teaching these young girls self-defense because sometimes they're picked up overnight in the school and dragged across the border. Why? There's also not enough women. And so this woman, Ruchira Gupta, I think she just came out with a book and she's been a role model of mine she's changing lives. And I'm one of those lucky people that get to tell her story once in a while. So thank you.
And everyone should check out her book and look up Ruchira. She's awesome in every way, and her new book is especially timely because of the things that we're talking about and how making sure that we have enough resources. The book is called "I Kick and I Fly," and it is something that you will definitely want to check out. So look her up and. Here is PK is asking any upcoming dedicated show soon on AI since Sri is an expert of technology. Thank you. I don't know if it'll fit into the read along format, but I am doing workshops all over the world, including virtual ones and lunch and learn. If you want to have me come in for 20 minutes or 3 hours to talk about AI in a practical, non-scary way, please reach out. You know, Shreya, you've seen some of the stories saying this is going to end the world and all of that. I say, okay, but what if it doesn't end the world and we still have to survive? We need to understand this and not panic over it. And that's what we're talking about. So thank you very much, everyone who joined us. We are super grateful to all of you. There's that book. What would you do today if you had to fight for your life tomorrow? I Kick and I Fly. Love it and love the work you do. Those girls are now gold medalists in karate and college graduates. The book is I Kick and I Fly. So that's amazing. And Naomi says a great addition to the New York Times brand and a great show. So thank you all for watching. Ruchira says she loves these memories and the coming full circle. And Miriam says hi to Ruchira. And this is really, folks, our New York Times read along family. Our connections here are all about doing good, helping people as much as we can, understand this moment of great pain and misinformation, disinformation. We're going in, the war's continuing. We're going into two major landmark elections in the next year. Everyone knows about the US in my audience here, but some of my audience also knows the Indian elections, general elections are coinciding. They almost never coincide because they're 5-year and 4-year terms, but they're coinciding in 2024. It's going to be a crazy ride for a whole variety of reasons. And Ruchira says, how wonderful to have this circle of support. We'll say goodbye to everybody and thank you very much. And good luck, Shreya. And everyone, check out the audio app, NYT Audio, and download, please, the app and follow Shreeya Sinha at Shreeya Sinha on Twitter. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Shree and Neil.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, 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 bye.